Minus 0.6%, so minus 0.6%. That is the average productivity growth of the UK construction sector in the 20 years prior to COVID. Every year, they grew minus 0.6%. Germany and France, no better. They were about 0.5% negative. And the US was worse. So there is a productivity problem within the sector. 44%. That is the percentage of workers in the construction industry in Hong Kong who are over the age of 50. That's creating massive problems for the Hong Kong market. 40%. The percentage of whole life cycle emissions that are emitted during the construction process itself, and also, just for the sake of interest, Oxford Economics assessment of productivity improvements that could be captured by the use of artificial intelligence in the construction sector. Lastly, 1.6 trillion US dollars. McKinsey's estimate of the value that could be captured by the implementation of artificial intelligence in construction. So the opportunities are huge, but it's not just about digital. Digital is an enabler of all sorts of other changes that we have to make.
But the question around, the role of digital in freeing us up to make some more creative, interesting decisions when it comes to big infrastructure projects. I mean, again, you could go back to PAS 2080. It's got in it, because I've counted them, 20 references to challenging the status quo by some means or another, which is quite unique in a dry old standard. I mean, to actually specifically ask for people to challenge. But that's the whole point of it. It starts from the very basics. When you're thinking about your project, do you even need to build anything at all? I mean, that's a pretty low carbon option. Yeah. If you are going to build something, can you do it in a nature first, nature positive way before you even start to use horrible stuff like concrete and steel? I mean, that's quite an interesting question for a inquisitive engineer. And then if you do have to then use something horrible like steel and concrete, how can you use the least of it possible in the most efficient, productive way, so that we do as least damage to the environment as possible?
If I can just add on to a point, because I think it's great, we were talking about the low carbon and the nature base. There's another angle as well that we found on the data side, adding value. It's really about creating spaces and places for people on the wellness and well-being side, which is an area that people don't talk about too much. So that whole data side, as well as making things more efficient and more effective, what it also does is allows us to start projecting forward and say, well, what about this scenario? What about that? How might people use it? How might people value from it? Where's the social value coming from? Where's the natural value? So data is incredibly powerful in taking us to that point, which we couldn't before. We were just looking, does it work? Is it utility efficient? And we've moved way on from that now.
I think there is the natural tendency to think that the economic outcomes seem to come first. When we're looking at the built environment, when you're looking at governments trying to foster a national economy built out of real estate, you kind of think it's all about the economics. And how can digitization be a tool to enhance the economics of a region? But then other desired outcomes, I mean, clearly, the environmental outcomes. How can we be using digitization and digital modeling to be able to measure, map and monitor the climate impacts of rising sea levels and changes in ambient temperature and noxious pollutants in the atmosphere? The cultural data that comes with transmigration of people as we are fleeing areas either war-torn or under the risk of climate change issues. We are constantly having to go to new regions, new realms. How can we be conscientious of the cultural idiosyncrasies of the place? Basically, economic outcomes are one thing, but I also think that spatial, cultural, environmental, technological outcomes are equally important. Just like we kind of hold up on a platform social, economic, environmental pillars, similarly there should be spatial, cultural and technological pillars of data that can actually inform better built environments for which we're going to be creating.